craft paint, craft paint of your choosing, any color. I preferably use the nutmeg brown, typically I use, but you can do blacks, blues, greens, any colors you want, and your piece of wood to stain. This one has some darker grain in it, but we're going to just work with it. Now, if you're worried about your hands, you can wear gloves, but because we're using craft paint, you can just go wash your hands in the sink. If you choose not to go have that extra expense of buying gloves. If you already got them, you want to use them, you can. It's entirely up to you. So let's get our paint open because this is a new one. Let's get our little seal up here. Of course, we get paint everywhere. Of course. I didn't realize I hadn't opened it yet, or I would have opened it before I turned the camera on. But that's okay. We're just going to open it a little bit. So you want to take your baby wipe, and you want to just get a little bit of paint. Now, because I only use this for baby wipes, I'm just going to dip my baby wipe in it. But you can just put some on your board and use that, smear it around, but you don't want to let it sit too long, because if you let it sit too long, it's going to leave a stain just like a stain would. So, and then you just want to take your baby wipe and you just want to go along. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and pour a little bit because we're ready to go here. And you just want to keep going along. Now, I would suggest, first time user, pour some in a dish and dip. But because I've done this a few times, I'm going to go ahead and pour some on my board. And then you're just going to smear it in like you would stain. And again, keeping in mind that you don't want to leave any thick spots sitting there for too long. And we're just going to keep spreading until we have a nice even coat all along the board. And you can go, if this is not dark enough for you, you can very easily come back after it dries and do another coat. It's gonna work just like stain. So I'm gonna go ahead and do all my edges because any overflow will leave markings. So you wanna make sure you're smearing everything in really good. Just going to get my edges on this back side, and then I'll show you the front side first because I just want to make sure I don't have too many thick spots on the back side. Alright, I'll make sure I have a nice smooth coat. And see, you get a little bit on your hands, but again, it's craft paint. So now if you're in a real hurry, you can take a dryer or your heat gun and just run along the board. And get it a nice good heat. And you're going to have, if you have a very coarse board, it's going to pull some of the baby wipe up. So you're going to have to clean that after. But if you don't, then you shouldn't have too many issues. Now this is not 100% dry. I just dried enough so we can flip it over and do our second side. And I'm going to grab a new baby wipe for that. I'm just going to pour a little bit of my paint down and go ahead and get my second side. Now, putting more on that first time, it's not going to get you a darker coat. You want to let it dry and then go back over it if you want it darker. Now, if you want it to look more cherry, then add a tiny bit of red to your brown. If you want it to look more dark, you can add a little bit of black to it. If you want it completely black, then just do black paint because it's going to go on like a stain and it's going to, so once you've stained it, so like see I just took a clean wipe and I was able to lighten that up because I wasn't happy with the color. So I lightened it up a little bit with a fresh baby wipe. But if you love the darkness, then stick with dark and then let it completely dry, and then go back over with a second layer if you really, really want a dark wood. You can use darker paints, like I said. You're looking more walnut. Add a little bit of black to your brown. I typically like to use the nutmeg as my base for all my colors. I have tried a few of them by themselves, and it wasn't quite what I was looking for, because I really do like this light brown. So I'll take the light brown and just add. So if I want a little bit of blue, like antique look to it, I'll add blue to my brown. So I'll drizzle some brown, and then I'll drizzle some blues and go that way. So now you want to make sure everything's completely dry. And you do that just by drying with a blow dryer, or you can just let it sit. It doesn't take very long sitting, but I definitely, if you're in a rush, you want to take your blow dryer or your heat gun. And you'll be able to feel it dry. Like this is almost dry down here. This spot's a little wet still. You can feel it because it's paint, so it doesn't take that long. Look, we're like 6 minutes in and we've already stained it. Now we're just waiting for the dry. So once you know that your whole board is dry, and that's both sides and your edges, you always want to make sure your edges are dry. A lot of people forget about that. And then they touch it and they're like, why do I have paint on my hands? I'm typically one of those people. So I'm telling you, make sure your edges are dry as well. And then just go across that one last good hit. We're going to make sure this side is nice and dry. I actually think I like the other side better. I'm not sure. So when I'm ready, I'll have to make that decision what side I like better to chalk on. But you can chalk on both sides. It's entirely up to you. But I just want to make sure that we're good and dry. Now this is completely ready board. So we went from this to a beautiful stained piece of wood. Okay, it shows all my grain, shows everything I was looking for. So now, let's put this away. To prep the board, that's the important part. So now if you have any like lifted areas or whatever on your board, just take a sand sponge and you just, it's gonna get loud for a minute, guys. And just go across it real gentle. And just make sure you have a nice, smooth surface. That's really important. A nice, smooth surface. It doesn't take much if you're using a good piece of wood. Now, if you're using wood from the barn, then you might have to do a little bit more sanding, and you might even need a power sander. But it all depends on your board. This board was not... this was purchased, so it was a pretty smooth piece of wood. But you just want to make sure it's nice and smooth. Maybe sand your edges a little bit. And make sure everything is good to go. Now once I'm done with that, I'll usually take a paper towel and I'll just wipe over it one more time, just to make sure there's no debris, no wet spots. And it's good to go. Now to prep this, because it is a piece of wood, we are going to add wax, if I can find my wax here. So this is a surface wax. We actually offer this in my shop that you can go to, or you can get a Minwax or any kind of surface wood wax. So I'm just going to take a little bit of it. Now, if your directions say let it sit, let it sit. This one says let it sit for 15 minutes. I typically don't, but I just put a little bit on and I just kind of rub it around. And like I said, I'm new to the waxing thing, so I am learning that I love it. I used to not be a big fan of waxing my surfaces, but let me tell you, I did this last night and I'm sold. I definitely love the wax surface better than I do just using the straight wood. because this is going to protect your transfers. This is going to protect anything that you're putting on there. It's going to make it go on smoother, and it's definitely going to just give you an overall better look. Okay, so now I just rubbed it on. Like I said, it says let it sit 15 minutes. I did not let it sit 15 minutes the other day. But you can feel already the difference in the smoothness of the wood. So I'm not sure if on camera you can see the difference versus the, see how dull that is? This just has a nice cleaner look. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this side as well. And again, this is not a stain, so it's not an issue with touching it or anything like that, but you just want to make sure you get your whole surface with this wax. And like I said, it does recommend that you let it sit 15 minutes. If you've got 15 minutes, by all means let it sit. If you're using a different wax, you've got the time that it tells you, by all means do it. But this is showing you how to do a project quick if you're last minute in a rush. All right, so now we've waxed both sides really well, and you don't need a huge thick layer. And I think letting it sit 15 minutes typically is if you're doing a really thick layer. But take your heat gun and just run it along. You don't have to pay huge attention to any particular spot. Just give it a nice, good heat coat. And then take a clean paper towel and just kind of buff it a little bit. That makes sure you have no big clumps of wax anywhere. I know I'm shaking the table, guys, I'm sorry. But just make sure that you have no big chunks. You see I just dropped my lid over the table. But this just helps the process go a little bit faster. Now, I'm doing that with my wax. I don't know what will happen with Minwax. I have not used Minwax yet. Like I said, I'm just getting on board. But I just want to show you guys my process. And you're going to be able to tell. You're going to be able to tell if the wax is dry or not, because you're going to have smooth, and then you're going to have kind of a little bit of a sticky area. So those are the areas you want to make sure that you focus on the heat and getting it buffed in. And there we have it. We're done. Our surface is prepped, ready to go for chalking. And like I said, you can definitely feel and see the difference. And this is what it started out with. This is a piece of the board cut off. So it is the exact same board. It really is. But that's what we started with. And now we have this gorgeous stained piece of wood. And for cheap, because you can get those bottles for like 50 cents. And then your choice of the wax. I don't know where the lid went. But this is one we did last night. Same piece of wood, but it's prepped and ready to chalk. Your transfer's not gonna stick, and you're just good to go with your project. And what are we at? We're at 14 minutes. So in 14 minutes, with me talking and explaining, we stained, prepped, and made a beautiful piece of wood ready to go. And the chalk-in takes a few minutes. So you're good to go. So I hope that, guys, I hope Tip for Tuesday helped you. Again, my name is Jamie. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I see them. And I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope that helps you with a quick, simple, easy way to prep a piece of wood. And you can do this with any kind of wood, any type of wood, just depending on your roughness on how much sanding you have to do. But that's it. So thank you guys for watching. Talk to you later. Bye.